Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Amidst the flames that have consumed the city of Los Angeles, a tattooed gangster finds himself trapped between the rubble and the searing heat. While everyone was frantically seeking shelter, the thug stopped in front of a mosque that stood strong, untouched by the fire. In desperation, he entered the mosque, a place he never imagined he would visit. But what happened inside the mosque was more than just a rescue from the blazing fire. The mosque saved more than just his body, it saved his soul. What the thug finds there changes his life forever, bringing him from darkness to light. How a great tragedy became the beginning of a thug's spiritual journey. Watch and listen until the end. Michael is a 35-year-old man who lives hard in the midst of the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles. His body is full of wounds as evidence of his dark life journey. Michael's name is famous in the tough neighborhood where he lives, not as a hero, but as a thug who always oppresses the weak. With his muscular body and loud voice, he often extorts helpless people, from small traders to teenagers on the street corner. However, behind his arrogant attitude, there is a soft heart, although buried by a past full of wounds. Michael grew up in a broken home. His father was an alcoholic who often took out his anger on his mother. Meanwhile, his mother chose to leave them when Michael was a teenager. The loss of family affection made Michael grow up without guidance, making him a figure who always felt the need to show strength so as not to look weak in the harsh environment where he lived. Power is everything, and Michael decides to survive by becoming one of the most feared. However, Michael is not as tough as he appears. There are moments when he sits alone at night, staring at the starry sky above Los Angeles. At times like this, he often asked himself, "Is my life just like this? What do I really want?" However, those questions were always buried by the hustle and bustle of the next day. Michael will be back on the streets, staring at people with a fierce gaze, living life without direction. The city streets that glitter during the day can turn into a dark place at night. For Michael, this is a challenging playing field. Every day is about survival, dominating territory, and making sure others submit to him. However, deep inside, Michael often feels tired. The fatigue is not due to physical strength, but from the ongoing internal battle. He knew something was missing in his life. But Los Angeles was not a place that could provide answers for Michael. The city was full of situations he could not control. A sound broke the silence of the night. From a distance, the sky was red, as if it was being devoured by a raging fire. Thick smoke began to cover the street, and the air became scorching hot. The people inside the bar panicked, running outside to see what was happening. Michael walked out casually, but his eyes widened as he saw the fire approaching, devouring everything in front of him. As he continued running, Michael saw something strange amidst the destruction of the city. A mosque stood firmly among the collapsed and burned buildings. Its roof was still intact, its walls were clean, without a single trace of fire. Even the small garden in front of it looked green, as if the fire had never touched the place. Michael stopped in his tracks. His breath was ragged, his eyes couldn't believe what he was seeing. "What is this?" he thought. His logic refused, but the reality in front of him couldn't be ignored. The fire that was devouring the surroundings seemed to stop around the mosque, not daring to approach. Michael faces a huge dilemma. Should he continue running for another place of refuge, or should he enter the mosque, a place he had avoided for so long because he felt he didn't deserve to be there? His anxiety lasted for a few moments, but the loud crashing sound of a building collapsing nearby made him make up his mind. With hesitant steps, he stepped into the mosque, hoping it would be a safe place for him. As soon as he passed through the door of the mosque, the atmosphere inside felt different. Quiet, peaceful, and cool. There was no sign of the chaos that was happening outside. Michael stood in the middle of the main room, his eyes wandering around the room, decorated with simple yet beautiful ornaments. For the first time in his life, he felt something inexplicable, a calmness that enveloped his entire body. Outside, the fire continued to rage, but inside the mosque, Michael felt like he was in another world. He didn't know how long he would be safe there, but for the first time, he felt that maybe there was something bigger watching over him. Michael stood frozen in the middle of the main hall of the mosque. His breath was still heavy after running for his life. Outside, the roar of fire and the ruins of buildings could be heard continuously, but inside the mosque there was only an almost magical silence. He felt the cool air from the cold ceramic floor, very different from the burning heat outside. He walked slowly around the room, his hands touching the walls of the mosque that felt solid. Simple ornaments with beautiful calligraphy were displayed in several parts. Although he did not know what the writing meant, Michael felt like an uninvited guest. But there was no other choice. Here he was safe, at least for now. The first day passed with anxiety. Michael sat in the corner of the mosque, his body leaning against the wall. His eyes looked towards the door warily, afraid that the fire would break in at any moment. He tried to close his eyes, but the roar outside kept him awake. When the second day arrived, Michael began to realize that he had to survive. There was no food in the mosque, but he found a water tap in the ablution area. Carefully, he turned on the tap and felt the fresh water flowing into his mouth. He drank the water greedily, the torturous thirst slowly disappearing. "I will not give up," he thought to himself. He stared at the high ceiling of the mosque, contemplating what had happened. Everything felt so foreign, as if he was in a place that did not belong. However, the peace inside the mosque made him feel strange, but also calming. For days, Michael drank only tap water. His stomach was churning with hunger, but he persevered. He felt something keeping him here. He had never believed in miracles before, but this mosque changed that. The roaring sound subsided and the hot air was slowly replaced by the coolness of the night. Michel stepped out of the mosque carefully. He saw the remains of crushed boxes, debris everywhere, and smoke still billowing. But he was safe. The mosque had protected him. After the tragedy, Michel did not immediately return to his old life. He felt something was different, something he had never felt before. The peace that enveloped his heart while in the mosque continued to linger. Slowly, he began to return to the mosque, although he himself did not know what attracted him to come back. For him, the mosque was the place that had saved his life. As he sat on the terrace of the mosque, he reflected, letting his mind sink into a calmness he had never experienced before. One morning, a middle-aged man with a Rama smile approached him. "What brings you here, son?" the man asked. Michael told him all about the fire, about how the mosque remained intact, and about how he survived. The man listened intently, then said, "Maybe this is God's way of showing you something." The words kept ringing in Michael's head. For the first time in his life, he began to sense that there was something bigger than himself, something he had ignored. After the tragedy of the fire, Michael no longer felt the same. The heart that had previously been filled with anger and violence began to be set aside. Deeper questions about what had saved him kept drawing him back, as if some invisible force was calling him every morning. Michael sat on the porch of the mosque, watching the people who came to pray. Some came with friendly smiles, walking with calmness. He watched as they washed their hands, faces, and feet in the ablution area before entering the main room. The ritual seemed simple, but there was sincerity in it. One day, one of the mosque's congregants, a man named Ahmad, approached Michael. Ahmad was a man in his 50s, with a white beard and a warm smile. "You are often seen here. What brings you to this mosque?" he asked gently. Michael was hesitant at first, but eventually he told how the place had saved his life. Ahmad listened intently, never interrupting. When Michael finished speaking, Ahmad smiled and said, "Allah is the protector. Maybe he showed you something." That conversation was the beginning of a big change in Michael's life. He began to ask Ahmad more questions about the mosque, about prayer, and about Islam. Ahmad explained patiently, using simple words. He never forced Michael to believe, but always invited him to think and find the answers himself. Day by day, Michael began to feel more comfortable in the mosque. He sat inside while the congregation prayed, even though he did not do it himself. He listened to the recitation of verses from the Quran that sounded so peaceful. Slowly, the anxiety that had haunted him began to disappear, replaced by a peace he had never felt before. One morning, after weeks of coming to the mosque, Michel recited the 2 sentences of the Shahada in a voice that trembled slightly, but was full of conviction. "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger." That sentence became the beginning of his new journey. With a firm heart, he was determined to help the community. Michel was also known as a kind person and was always ready to help anyone in need. The mosque became a place where he learned to worship and found a new meaning in life. Michel not only found refuge in the mosque during the fire, but also found the path to true peace that he had been searching for. The miracle of the mosque saved his life. The more he came to the mosque, the more he felt that the place was not just a shelter, but a new home that filled the void in his life. He often talked with Ahmad, and other members of the congregation heard their stories and studied the teachings of Islam. Slowly, Michael began to understand the concept of God that was different from what he had previously believed. However, Michael's inner journey was not easy. There were nights when he was haunted by doubt. Is this really my path? Am I worthy of being a part of this? He thought as he looked at the night sky from the mosque terrace. His past as a thug, the violence he committed, and the sins he considered unforgivable often made him feel unworthy. One day, Michael dared to express his doubts to Ahmad. "I feel unworthy to be here. My life is full of sin," he said. "I'm not someone who just listens to other people's words," he said in a hoarse voice. Ahmad listened patiently, then said, "Islam is about starting over. Allah is forgiving, Michael. No sin is too big to be forgiven. If you truly want to change, Allah doesn't look at who you were in the past, but who you want to be now." Those words calmed Michael's heart. He felt there was hope for him. With a trembling voice, he said, I want to change." Ahmad smiled. "That's a wonderful decision, Michael. Let's do it together." That day, in front of Ahmad and several members of the mosque, Michael stood nervously but confidently. All eyes looked at him with hope and support. Ahmad guided him to recite the 2 sentences of the Shahada, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Michael followed him with a trembling voice but full of determination. The atmosphere was silent for a moment before finally the echo of takbir resounded around. Tears of joy flowed down Michael's face. For the first time, he felt true peace. Today you are like a newborn baby. All your past sins have been erased. Start a new life with good intentions. Michael feels like a new man. The mosque that was once just a shelter from the fire has now become a symbol of the beginning of his spiritual journey. He is determined to leave his dark past behind and live a more peaceful life and find his true self. Islam gave him a second chance, a way to return to God, start anew, and live a meaningful life. After officially embracing Islam, Michael's life changed drastically. The mosque that once saved him from the flames is now the center of his new life. He is no longer the Michael who was known as a rude and arrogant thug. He is Michael, a humble, loving man, always looking for ways to help others. His days are now filled with learning about religious teachings, from reading the Quran to understanding the true meaning of love and forgiveness. He also began to join social activities held at the mosque, helping to provide food to the homeless and supporting fire victims who had lost everything. Michael's changes were not only felt by himself, but also by his environment. People who used to fear and hate his differences now saw a man who had repented and improved himself, a man who no longer lived for himself, but to benefit others. Michael also repaired his relationship with his family. He contacted his mother, whom he hadn't seen in a long time, to apologize for all the mistakes of the past. Their meeting was filled with tears, and Michael felt that the peace he found in the mosque had opened the way to healing old wounds. Sue Soriluk sat on the mosque's terrace, watching the sun slowly set in the west, reflecting on her journey. From what he now realizes, the reality is clear. Anyone, no matter how bad their past, has the opportunity to change. He is an example of how sincerity and a desire to improve oneself can pave the way to a better life. Today, Michael is not only known as a convert to Islam, but also as an inspirational figure in his community. He often shares stories about how the mosque saved him, both physically and spiritually. His story serves as a reminder to many that there is always a way back and that God's forgiveness knows no bounds. Michael's days are now filled with peace and a clear purpose in life. He has found his new home not only in the mosque building, but also in his faith. His life, which was once filled with emptiness, is now filled with gratitude, love and hope. Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. That's it. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.